This week, Emmet and I discussed the just concluded Phase 4 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. What did we like? What didn't we like? Why is there so much complaining about it? Is the universe getting too complex? We'll get into all of it. First, if you appreciate the work we do on Deconstructing Comics and our other podcasts and want bonus content, we'd love it if you'd support the show at patreon.com/deconcomics for as little as $2 a month. Our monthly issue-by-issue look at 1960s Amazing Spider-Man comics is available to patrons chipping in at least $4 a month. Check out our goals and rewards and pledge your support now at patreon.com/deconcomics. This is Tim.
This is Emmet.
And this is Deconstructing Comics. Welcome to Deconstructing Comics. This is Tim in Tokyo with Emmet outside Melbourne somewhere down in Australia. How you doing?
I'm very well. Thank you, Tim. Thanks for having me.
So I was moved to say, let's do an episode talking about MCU Phase 4. And it's not like there's any lack of articles and videos on the web talking about this topic. I did a little research and just kind of scratched the surface of that whole MCU Phase 4 discussion universe. It was interesting, though, because reading some of those articles kind of put me in touch with some of the feelings that I had about some of the projects within Phase 4. Like, oh yeah, I guess I did kind of feel that way. Or that's why I was disappointed in that one. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page here, there were 7 movies, which were Black Widow, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, Eternals, Spider-Man No Way Home, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness, Thor Love and Thunder, and Black Panther Wakanda Forever. There were 8 TV series: WandaVision, Falcon and Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, Moon Knight, Ms. Marvel, and She-Hulk. And then 2 specials, Werewolf by Night, which is the only one I didn't watch, and Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special. Did you watch it? Was it any good?
Yes. It was one of the ones I had down as, let's talk about this.
Okay, because I wanted to start out with, positive. Was this something that you liked?
It's something that number one, I really enjoyed it. Number two, I only today discovered that the director of Werewolf by Night, Michael Giacchino, he's a composer by trade.
Oh.
Right, and he's actually composed music for a number of the Marvel movies as well. And now he's launching himself as a filmmaker. It's very much an exercise in mood. It's, if you're at all familiar with the Universal horror movies, so taking us back to the original Lon Chaney Wolfman, but if you Frankenstein's and so on, it's evoking that with the use of black and white and this sort of timeless aspect to you're not quite sure when it's taking place. And he had a very game cast of actors, all hamming it up a storm. One of the actors, I think he's playing a character called Jovan, and he's playing with this really thick Scottish accent. And so the premise of Werewolf by Night is a bunch of characters who are all would-be supernatural headhunters, if you like, people who hire their services to hunt down supernatural creatures, have all been gathered together by the estate, the Bloodstone estate. Ulysses Bloodstone has passed away. He was a Marvel character, and his daughter arrives, and she's contesting. She wants to inherit the Bloodstone, which is where Ulysses got his powers from. And his widow is saying, no, you abandoned the family. We want nothing to do with you. And all these other hunters are competing for the Bloodstone, including a strange young man with markings on his face. We are going, oh, well, he's clearly somebody. He's from Itamamia Tambien. He's clearly somebody. He's going to be the main character. And Jovan, who's one of these headhunters, thick Scottish accent, keeps insisting that he's this amazing killer of monsters. He's the director of a bunch of Muppet movies. A bunch of the Muppet movies. He's the director. And I found out that today, and I was like, that's nuts. Because I thought he was like a sort of a jobbing British actor, maybe he'd done a bunch of Doctor Who or something. And I looked at him and I was like, oh, he's a director. And it sort of spoke to me, particularly with the Giacchino as well. It spoke to me that this was a short film made by people who love films and love the idea that in this Marvel television space, I think there's a looser leash on the creative teams. I think we will explore that a bit when we go through our examples, but Werewolf by Night is one where let's just do a love letter to Universal horror movies. Let's have a bunch of cameos of Marvel characters, particularly the 70s horror Marvel characters. Like you're talking Tomb of Dracula, Blade, I'm not saying Blade is in it, but like the characters and concepts from Blade. You have your Man-Thing. You've got your all these sort of horror books that came out in the 70s. They sort of put all these elements into a funnel. And Werewolf by Night, who's also a Marvel character, he's connected to Moon Knight, but he doesn't appear in Moon Knight, the show. They're all in this, and I was like, this is just great. This is just nerdy fun. And I think because it was tonally and visually distinct from all these other Marvel things, with the possible exception of WandaVision, I think that's why the fan reaction to Werewolf by Night was, oh, this is actually something quite special. But it was a done-in-one 5-minute, like very short little mini-film, and I don't think it got a lot of push. It was just released around Halloween, and it was sort of an unexpected delight. It was just one of those ones that came out and was like, oh, this is just a little bit of an experiment with sort of the darker elements of Marvel's catalog. And
really, it's only 5 minutes long.
45 minutes.
45 minutes. Okay,
something like that.
Misheard you. Okay, yeah, I was like, why bother if it's 5 minutes long?
I might be wrong with that, but it's like it's not like a full feature length movie. It's
I found as I was thinking about this that on the whole, I liked the TV shows better than the movies.
Yeah.
And particularly I enjoyed Moon Knight, which kind of surprised me because my Moon Knight is 80s Moon Knight by Doug Monk and Bill Sienkiewicz, back before somebody decided that the different identities were DID rather than just aliases that Moon Knight used to gather information. Because that's the version I prefer. In the comics anyway, I never really enjoyed the he's got DID aspect. But still, I enjoyed Moon Knight even with the DID in the TV show. I'm not quite sure what it was about it, but it's just some interesting kind of, the DID sort of made it interesting, actually, which I hadn't expected. But and it's not knowing what's going on sometimes with your other identities.
And I just listened to your episode,
the third person, and this is very different. This is not a clinical dissociative identity discussion. It's highly tied to supernatural forces, and the comics like that have leaned more into that aspect of it, like the Jeff Lemire run, Greg Smallwood run, which I really, really love. I think that was a huge influence on this show. And the Warren Ellis run with Declan Shalvey, to a greater or lesser degree, sort of more emphasize the mystical aspect of this and the Egyptian magic aspect of this, and the fact that you've got an Egyptian showrunner and Egyptian members of cast as well, like Layla's played by Egyptian Palestinian actress May Calloway. She's fantastic as well. I thought she was amazing. That really lifted this for me. It was like, this is not a show that's just borrowing pell-mell from Egyptian mythology. It's actually rooted with some of the creative voices in Egyptian culture, which helped a lot. So that sort of grounding of it meant that it wasn't a cheap take on DID. It wasn't a cheap take on Egyptian mythology, which Moon Knight has always leaned on. And the character sort of drew from all these different sources and was ultimately a richer one for that. Yeah.
Plus it helps that Oscar Isaac is your star.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, he was great. That was another good aspect of it was just him and how his face would completely change when he was a different personality. Like, you could tell just by looking at his face which personality was in charge.
Can I share a story with you just very quickly? A friend of mine from England messaged me when the trailer dropped for Moon Knight, and we saw, because we weren't introduced to Mark in any of the publicity, it was Stephen, and he's speaking in this English accent, and he's behaving as very sort of, he's this weakling, sort of shy, retiring type, and this friend of mine said, I mean, it looks interesting, but I mean, that accent sounds ridiculous. And I had to bite my tongue and say, that's what you sound like. The English accent, I'm sorry. And it's not it's multifarious. There's all sorts of English accents. Sure. But like, particularly the southern regions of England, you all sound like whingers to me. I'm Irish. Be angry with me. But yeah, no, I enjoyed that.
So, what did you think of She-Hulk?
Okay, so I watched the first episode of She-Hulk, and it's the Jessica Gao show, and starring Tatiana Maslany, who, if anyone's seen more Orphan Black, this woman has range. She can do anything really. And Jessica Gao was involved with Rick and Morty, so she's sort of up on that. Let's just throw things at the canvas and see what sticks. Rick and Morty is now mired in all sorts of controversies, but we don't need to get into that right now. We're just talking about Jessica Gao. She took this premise of She-Hulk as the metafictional She-Hulk that John Byrne really introduced. The idea of she knows she's in a comic book. Here she knows she's in a television show. But the plot borrows a lot from the Dan Slott era. Although, interestingly, someone reminded me of this recently. In the Dan Slott comic book, they don't want She-Hulk. They want her, civilian alter ego. Whereas in the show, they want She-Hulk.
Right. They don't want Jennifer. They want She-Hulk.
They want the superhero persona to represent superheroic characters, clients. So Dan Slott's comic book, which I read back in the early 2000s, was pitched as Ally McBeal with superheroes, and had a lot of continuity porn in it, lots of cameos, lots of nods to the metafiction element of it. The basement of the law firm actually had a library of Marvel comics that had been, which were the published adventures of the characters we were meeting. So she could actually read up on what these Absorbing Man had been doing, or whatever.
Right.
This idea of the comics exist in the same universe. So the show is sort of, and Jessica Gao, I believe, has done all the research, right? I am, again, as we always do in these conversations, Tim, I am sort of trying to establish my bona fides in this. The first episode dropped. I did not like it. Okay? Now, here's the thing. I kept watching. Maybe I'm a glutton for punishment. I don't know. It was fine. It was. Let me make this clear. I wasn't like angry about it or anything like that. I wasn't upset. Oh my god, this is not my show. Nothing like that. It just felt a bit ho hum. I was like, oh okay. As the show progressed, we got to spend more time with Tatiana Maslany's interpretation of the character, and we also got to spend more time with Jessica Gao, like really teasing at this idea of this character knows that they're in a television show, to the point where by the final episode, everything's just up in the air, and I absolutely loved it. I went whole 180 on this. The whole way around, because by the end of it, I was like, this is fantastic. I love this. Tim Roth is doing some weird, basically recovering the abomination of his character Abomination from that movie and going, let's just have some fun. And it was a really enjoyable experience. I actually felt like it should have been the proper capstone to Marvel Phase 4, because it was the one that just was like, let's just make fun of all of this. Let's just, it's like the episode of Erie, Indiana, when all the characters realize the main character realizes he's in a television show. It was just one of those things. Peek behind the curtain, confront the camera, confront the audience watching. Really, really enjoyed it. And the story goes that Jessica Gao had really pitched this idea of the robot character at the end, the computer character wearing the cap.
Yeah, the Kevin Feige trademarked baseball cap.
Yeah, and he, for some reason, was pushing back on that. And then she's like, "Okay, well, I quit." And then he's like, "All right, well, you've done a fine job." Basically, blink first, And I can believe that. I can believe that happened, but it just shows you silliness needs to be taken seriously in order for it to work. You need people to actually have passion for this in order for it not to just be nonsense. And ultimately, this felt like a reckoning for a lot of what Marvel's weaknesses have, been shown to be. Like the accumulation of all this media. Now you've got this situation where you're seeing definite trends in the depiction of female characters, definite trends in the depiction of the romance lives of these characters. Like Jennifer's like overt enjoyment of her fling with Daredevil is just one of the best jokes. And like she's like, yeah, he can get it. Like all of that just demonstrates what Marvel's good and bad at, and it was all in this show. And the fact that it became, I mean, this is kind of one thing. One of the trends we're going to see with this discussion, Phase 4, is that so much of it, because now you've got this nerd economy based around reacting to things. You can get clicks on YouTube, you can get podcast listeners, you can get Patreon money from. Next week, I'm dropping my review of The Last of Us. And, oh no, what's he going to say about The Last of Us? Like that's actually a phenomenon that exists in our culture at the moment. And one of the ways you make money is by being really angry about something to a ridiculous degree, right? Being like stupidly angry about something. And
that's why we don't have any listeners.
yeah, we're just cool, chill dudes. But the idea
we have
that
some listeners.
Any human being, I'm sorry, but any human being would be motivated to post angrily to the internet that a character twerked in a television show.
Oh, I know. I don't even pay much attention to it, but I know that melted the internet down.
I cannot fathom it. So my only conclusion is that's bullshit. It's fake rage. It's just a way of generating clicks. That's all it was. Like, it's not real. It's complete bad faith. No one actually cares. No one really cares. There's no possible way anybody genuinely feels that strongly about a character sticking their buttocks out rhythmically to a song. I am sorry. I do not believe you.
As far as stuff that I didn't like, or examples of things that I didn't like, Thor's situation bothers me because they've killed off most of his supporting cast. Nearly all the Asgardians are dead. Now Jane Foster's dead. I don't know if there's going to be any more Thor or not. I guess Chris Hemsworth is a maybe right now. But, it doesn't even feel like Thor anymore in a way. And then for Love and Thunder, because, Taika Waititi was trying to put humor in, but then you get this really dark villain. And it just didn't work for me. Like, why are you joking in this situation? Because this guy is humorless. This villain is not going to, if the villain were part of the goofiness, that would be different. But the villain was not goofy at all. And
counterpoint.
Okay.
Child catcher. GGC bang bang.
Sorry?
The villain, played by Christian Bale, in Thor Love and Thunder is a riff on the child catcher from Chitty Chitty Bang Bang.
Okay. I saw that movie a long time ago. And I remember
Children.
I remember I didn't like it, but
Well, maybe this is the problem.
So I guess there's a through line there, but
Maybe this is the problem we're having. Yeah, this is the one that people did not like, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked it. A lot of it was being able to spot a number of different Australian and New Zealand performers in it, up to and including Russell Crowe's performance as Zeus, being very familiar to me from my time in Melbourne grocer markets, where you've got gentlemen from the Aegean Sea yelling at you, selling their wares in a similar manner that Russell Crowe is just saying while he prances around in his skirt in the film. So look, I truly accept that this is a question of humor and one's taste in humor, and it just so happens that for me, Taika Waititi's sense of humor as a New Zealand creator, I feel like he sort of leans into that ridiculous and absurd. But also, if you've been following his career, a lot of his movies have sharp breakneck turns into tragedy, sadness, and he oscillates between them. And my wife and I, we've coined this phrase about his oeuvre, his career to date on Hopscotch Friday. We refer to his movies as happy sad movies, where you'll have moments of levity and then you'll have moments of sharp depression, and it just switches. And I find it interesting that Taika Waititi is now somebody who I think there's a bit of a backlash to happening. And part of that is his sense of humor, and his dramatic self is not something that Americans in particular seem to enjoy, because I think it puts them on edge a bit. He doesn't the sort of expected humility of somebody like him is not there. Like he's just like, yeah, I'm amazing. And I don't think they like that. Yeah. Anyway, sorry, but I appreciate where you're coming from. It wasn't for you.
Yeah, and also, now I guess this is probably an unpopular opinion, but I kind of didn't like No Way Home, particularly the ending. I hated the ending. Like, why are we going here? And Peter becoming forgotten by everybody was just a result of that dumb scene where Pete keeps changing his request to Doctor Strange, like who should forget him. And, so the whole thing just hinged on kind of stupidity of the characters. And so we end up with nobody remembers Pete, and we got the sad scene where he sees, his friends who don't remember him. I mean, seeing, the characters who came in from the other Spider-Man movies, that was kind of fun. But yeah, the ending, I really wanted to change.
Yeah, I think it's safe for us to talk about some aspects of the film because it was such a successful movie that everybody's seen it. There's no spoiling it anymore. But yeah, the Andrew Garfield performance is the aspect of the movie I keep thinking about. Andrew Garfield's second chance at playing Spider-Man, and actually maybe putting to rest his Spider-Man, who I think got a lot of critical drubbing when on release. Those two movies, that felt sweet to me. That felt like a lovely little send-off for his character.
He saved MJ.
He saved
where
MJ,
he couldn't save Gwen.
Yeah, that was all lovely. But I agree with you. I think it was a overlong, unnecessarily complicated.
They've all been overlong.
Well, that's true. Unnecessarily complicated at times. I felt the sense of fun that the Spider-Man movies have had since our latest Spider-Man has entered the proceedings, Tom Holland. A lot of it was sort of frittered away in this one. And I've never really enjoyed, and we've talked about this in our Spider-Man series, I've never really enjoyed the Parker luck excuse that a lot of writers trot out, that they just keep making him suffer. And I just don't find it particularly interesting because it's monotonous. It's just like it's like Charlie Brown.
Yeah, this just came to my mind too.
It's just okay, he's going to suffer more. Okay, great. But in this one, again, like, what was that one? The infamous Mephisto, I want your marriage. Again, it's down to a magical one more day, whatever it was called. It's down to a magical spell. Like, I don't find it particularly engaging, interesting. I loved seeing all the actors again. I loved seeing all the actors from the previous films get to, try out their old duds again.
Yeah,
have some
that part
fun.
was fun.
Dr. Octopus, like Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2 is genuinely like one of the high watermarks of superhero movies. It's up there. Like, it's one of the good ones. And, seeing like flashes of that was nice. Although Tobey Maguire didn't seem to think I think he was barely checked in.
Yeah, I think Spider-Man 2 is the Spider-Man movie I enjoyed the most of all of the ones that have come out.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're on bad. Eternals, go.
Oh, yeah. Well, we've already done this. We already did this in a recent episode, but my goodness, what a terrible movie. I feel like I'm being overly mean to it because I appreciate that there are people out there who enjoy this movie because it's giving them something they haven't had before. Good for you. I did not enjoy it. I thought it was pretentious. I thought it was overlong. The highlight for me was Barry Keoghan, the Irish actor who played Druig. I thought he was fantastic. I thought he's got charisma for spades. He's amazing. He was the highlight for me. But the rest of the movie was just a slog. And yeah, I think it took itself. The mistake it made is it took itself too seriously as a statement on some sort of philosophical concept of death and rebirth and finding meaning and your purpose in life, all the rest of it. It didn't hang together at all for me.
Yeah, I thought the biggest problem with it was there were too many characters, which, and they were all, I guess, from the comic. We haven't done a Eternals episode of the show yet as far as the comics, but and I've never read them. But to try to cram them all into one movie. And I noticed that they sort of kind of staggered their introduction in the movie, and we'll have some here, and then maybe one or two die, and then we introduce some more. But still, it was just like they all stayed kind of one-dimensional.
Yeah, they had one of the actors from Train to Busan, which is one of the best movies of the last 10 years. Like, a great genre movie, zombies on a train. Just a fantastic movie. And he enters the movie. He's playing, I think he's playing, he's not playing Ajax. He's playing the Ancient One or whatever. And he then leaves the movie at a certain point. And I was like, that man has more charisma than most of you feckers. Keep him in the mix. For God's sake. And it just felt like a waste of a character and a waste of an actor. And it just overall, that's how I felt about the movie. It felt like such a waste. Yeah, Eternals is not my favorite.
No.
Not my favorite at all.
And by the way, about the general overlongness of them, I mean, when I was a teenager, I wouldn't have mind, but I'm a 57-year-old man with an enlarged prostate, and I have a hard time making it through these movies without running to the restroom. I can't buy a drink anymore. Buying a drink at the movie theater is part of my past now, because I have to not take in any liquid for hours before I go to the theater. But anyway, so I wanted to take a look at how all of the MCU movies ranked as far as their gross and where the Phase 4 films fit into it. And I found that in the top 10, Spider-Man Far From Home is the only one from Phase 4.
Sure.
And there are just two more in the top 20, Multiverse of Madness and Love and Thunder, and then the others are between 23 and 28 out of 30 total films. Now, You could say part of it is probably because of COVID. I mean, Spider-Man notwithstanding, maybe for the other ones, people were staying away from the theater. And of course, Black Widow, they simultaneously released it on Disney Plus, and that hurt
definitely
its
suffered.
take.
Yep.
I mean, Black Widow's 28 out of 30 movies. Then also, some of the story problems in the movies apparently are related to like COVID restrictions. One of the articles I read, I saw so Falcon and the Winter Soldier. They were
heavily rewritten.
Shooting in Prague, and some of the rewriting was due to COVID restrictions in Prague, that they had to like change what was going on with the villains or something.
Yep.
WandaVision, they reduced it by one episode so that some people felt the ending seemed rushed. So yeah, there are COVID effects on it for sure. Coming up, the growing pains of the MCU. Is it all getting too complex? Should they have recast Steve Rogers and Tony Stark? And more. First, just a reminder that you can help this podcast by making your Amazon purchases via deconstructingcomics.com/Amazon and make that your bookmark for future purchases. Deconstructing Comics earns a bit of money from your purchase that helps us keep the show going. We really appreciate your support.
Do you like comics? The 1960s? How about middle-aged gay couples gossiping about their neighbors? Then you'll love Checkered Past.
A loving examination of DC's Go-Go Check branded comic magazines published from February 1966 to August 1967.
I'm Dr. Bob.
And I'm Dr. Husband.
And each week we'll be your hosts on a trippy tour through mid-century four-color madness. Checkered Past. Available wherever fine podcasts are downloaded for free.
I think my biggest problem with Phase 4 overall, and a lot of other people are saying this too, was that there didn't seem to be anything sticking all these different projects together.
Sure. Kumar, who is not in this episode, but we had a quick chat the other night about the premise for this episode. And one of the things we were trying to compare it to was the actual Marvel Comics line itself. So you had the initial success of, Jack and Stan and, and Steve. And then that builds and builds, and Stan Lee sort of wheels and deals, and then you got a younger generation of creators coming in and carrying water for Stan for a couple of years. And then in the 70s, you basically have like the third or fourth wave coming in. And in this, I feel like what we're looking at Phase 4 is it's comparable to 70s Marvel, where you had a bunch of weird stuff, you had a bunch of conventional stuff, you had Roy Thomas basically saying, Stan Lee's the greatest, and you had Steve Englehart going, I'm just going to do my thing over here, and I don't care what anyone thinks, and that's the stuff I really like. And Steve Gerber is like, he'll maybe send in a script. And if he doesn't, he'll send you an essay, and it'll also be the best essay you've read that month. Like Howard the Duck, I'm obviously referring to there.
Yeah.
So it was just higgledy-piggledy. There's all sorts of things. And what happened next in Marvel? Well, you had the dark age of the 80s.
Jim Shooter.
Jim Shooter, when everything became hyper-focused, and you've got your blockbusters, you've got your X-Men, you've got your Spider-Man.
Secret Wars,
marketing. I feel like obviously Marvel Studios has been looking to a lot of that from the jump. Once they became successful, they were marketing up the hilt. But I think that what I'm talking about is that sort of shooter vision of a cohesive, singular, let's push sales. I think that's what's coming. And that's, for me, that's when you miss a lot of that juicy weirdness of your Engleharts and your Gerbers and so on and so forth. And your Tomb of Dracula, your all the weird stuff that was coming out in the 70s. That all gets sort of blocked off, and we just start ramping up the IP of Marvel. You got your Chris Claremont And with Chris Claremont, you have your conventional action heroics, your blockbuster X-Men model, but there's always like these sort of hints at something. There's always hints of like kinky little details. That's what Chris Claremont's known for, or these like ongoing threads that maybe will get picked up on. And I felt like I was seeing something of that with Black Panther: Wakanda Forever, where the Julia Louis-Dreyfus character, like, it's hinting at something that hasn't happened yet.
Right.
It felt like a Chris Claremont script where it's like, now we're going to cut to this kitchen over here, and we're going to have two characters talk about olive oil for a scene. I'm going, what are we doing, guys? But that's what an X-Men comic used to be like. You would have like a big fight scene with the Brood, and then we're going to cut sharply to a London apartment, and Saturn 9 is going to be flirting with Katie Pride for a couple of pages in a very inappropriate manner. I'll add. That was Chris Claremont, and I wonder if that's what Phase 5 is going to be. That sort of hyper commercialized, hyper focused. Let's just get all the hits. They now own everything. They've got X-Men now. They're more or less yanking Spider-Man out of Sony's hands. Namor is now in the books as well. He was another holdout. Namor was one of the ones that there was all sorts of contractual issues with Namor. But now he's he's up there.
Fantastic Four.
She-Hulk kept hinting at something with Hulk that seems to be connected to the Planet Hulk storyline again, which we saw in Thor Ragnarok. But there seems to be some sort of suggestion that we're going to have Planet Hulk, whatever that was. And Hulk, again, was another character who we couldn't have a Hulk movie because of Universal. They had ownership of it. Now I wonder if that's being... the lawyers have gotten involved, and now we're going to get that. So I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see all hands on deck. And what I'm worried about is that we're not going to have your Taikas anymore. You're not going to have the randomness of, I think you're going to have something more like Black Widow, where a very good director, I think her name is Kat Shortland, is more or less being asked to stitch together a bunch of action scenes that don't really make any sense. She'll get to do her dramatic scenes. Like the stuff with Florence Pugh was great. Like a lot of Florence Pugh scenes in Black Widow are fantastic, as see also Hawkeye. But then the stuff around the dramatic, intimate scenes that Kat Shortland directed, I think she's an Australian film director, terrible.
Well, what bothered me was that supposedly we're now in the, what are they calling it, the multiverse saga. And we had multiverse mentioned in some of the movies, but it came up in Spider-Man, it came up in Doctor Strange, and it came up in Loki, but there's no real story connection between those different mentions of the multiverse. And it didn't come up in anything else. There is no multiverse in Moon Knight or Black Widow or Shang-Chi.
What if?
Right. What if? Yeah. What if is definitely related to the multiverse, but
yeah. And it's hugely disappointing. It was really bad. It wasn't good at all.
But yeah, I mean, it's just like came up on some of the articles too that like Phase 1 was also maybe kind of disjointed, but then they had Avengers. And that tied it all together because we had the introduction of Cap and Thor and Hulk and so on, and then they all show up together in a movie. And now you kind of see, okay, we've been kind of leading up to this team up. But Phase 4 was like, what's the connection between all these films? I mean, maybe it'll become clearer in subsequent phases. It looks like it from the titles of the upcoming movies, but
yeah,
we'll see.
You can't do that again. That's the thing. You can't, because now we've introduced all these other characters. But you can't have them all sort of, let's all team up. The sense I'm getting is that they're all going to have different patches where those stories are going to take place, like the Marvels movie. So you've got the Brie Larson Captain Marvel. You've got Monica Rambeau, played by Teyonah Parris, and then you've got Miss Marvel, Iman Vellani. Like, what a find! What a find! She's incredible. Miss Marvel is just what a great little performer. Jesus Christ, just pops off the screen. So they're all connected because they're all Marvels. They're different Marvels.
Mm-hmm.
They're all going to be in a movie together.
Right. Yeah, later this year.
Yeah, and I kind of would like if they just had that. If that was their patch, you know? And we didn't need to have Captain Marvel doing Avengers stuff because they've wasted her in the Avengers. Like, she's basically the big gun you bring in for the end of the film.
Well, and Phase 3 was kind of odd there because it looked like at the end of the Captain Marvel movie that she was kind of going to be the one who solved everything with Thanos, and then she kind of wasn't really. She showed up and then faded into the background, and
they had to send her away.
And Iron Man saved everybody.
Yeah. They needed to send her away because she's so powerful that they couldn't figure out a way to make her an plot element without, like, basically breaking the plot that they'd constructed. Which is very strange because, like, you could have just done a situation where, well, the challenge she faces, it's the same problem as the Superman story. The challenge she faces matches her ability. You know, so Superman meets opponents that are either able to outmatch him or outthink him. You know?
He doesn't normally fight the Joker, no.
Correct. Well, there was a John Byrne story where he did. It was very entertaining. But Captain Marvel in the movies, they just sent her away. They didn't even have it like the villain's like, oh, look, I can't defeat her. But what I can do is I can distract her with this event over here. It wasn't even a plot element. She just had something else to deal with. And the writers even made her seem quite intolerant about the fact that characters are asking her, well, are you going to help us? No, I've got to go over here. Don't talk to me. You know, it was I didn't like that at all, and I don't like what they've done to the character, and I think Brie Larson is a fantastic performer, and I feel like she's been sort of tied up with this and not able to really get out of it. I'm really interested to see what she gets to do in Marvels, because, you know, got a woman director as well, who recently did the Candyman remake, and if she's going to be on screen with Iman Vellani, and like Brie Larson did that movie Short Term 13, I think. She's very good with young performers, and Room as well. She's very good with young actors. She draws them out. Like, she was herself a young performer.
Yeah,
young actor.
Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, and there was another one which I can't remember right now, but the lady with multiple personalities. But she's an excellent performer, and I feel like she's just been forced into this mold that doesn't quite fit her. And again, she's been the target of this stupid culture war nonsense, because, again, there's this industry that makes money out of getting angry about this stuff. And I can't imagine anybody being angry about Brie Larson. I just can't imagine. Why? Anyway.
But, and also we've got, you know, as in the earlier phases, we've got, you know, end credit scene, you know, post credit scenes or mid credit scenes that are teasing something, but it used to be like teasing the next movie, and now it's teasing stuff that's coming out years in the future, you know, after a lot of other stuff comes out. Like, now I'm told that the voice that was heard in the very, very, very end of Eternals was Blade's voice, but, you know, the Blade movie is not coming out for another, you know, till like end of 2024. That'll be 3 years after Eternals came out.
Yeah, the Blade movie recently collapsed, and it's just been settled because there was issues with the director, apparently, and so the director was let go or left, however that shook out.
Well, yeah, I think it was that he quit because, now this is another thing we need to get to, is that Feige is too busy because they're putting out way too much stuff now, and like the director of Blade could hardly ever get in touch with Feige because he was so dang busy juggling 25 projects. And so he just kind of quit in frustration, is what I read. Okay.
Because, I mean, I think the problem you have there is that in a structure like this, you can't just have one person.
Right.
There needs to be delegation. There needs to be various chiefs.
Yeah, when
involved.
It was 1 or 2 films a year, it was fine, but...
Sure. There needs to... That's where the plan helps.
In 2 years, we had 7 movies and 8 TV series, and one person's overseeing it all.
Yeah, the Inverse just published a very interesting article about the filming of Helm's Deep in the Two Towers, Lord of the Rings: The Two Towers. So it's 20 years ago. My God, Tim. And one point that I think I knew before, but I hadn't really been drilled down to me what it actually meant, was that Peter Jackson's directing these movies, but he couldn't be on set for all of the different locations where they're filming, because they're filming all across the South Island. I think they were filming in North Island as well as on stages and so on and so forth in New Zealand. So they're filming Helm's Deep, and there's these different assistant directors taking on the responsibility of actually shooting some of the material. But Peter Jackson still needs to okay or sort of weigh in on certain decisions. What they did was they had satellite feeds beamed to him at a different location with the footage on the screen, and he was weighing in on decisions and going, yep, yes, yep, no, yes, no. And that is an interesting example to me of somebody who's happy to delegate to a point. Like, they were assistant directors on location who were actually giving the actors advice on what to do and how to perform and so on and so forth. But when key decisions had to be made, all right, let's get the satellite link up going with Peter Jackson. I'm not saying this is a code of, I don't want everybody to be abusing satellite networks to make decisions on movies. My point is, he was delegating authority to these assistant directors, and that's what you need.
Yeah.
You need a shared creative vision. And you put in the notes for this, what are our expectations for Phase 5? And I said to you before we started recording, I have no idea, because I don't see where this is going. And that's why I was trying to pitch that idea of like the Jim Shooter era Marvel, because that's the only way I see this going. This sort of shrinking of vision to like a pure commercially focused project. But that upsets me, because I thought that Marvel was, there were aspects of Marvel filmmaking that were, mixing it up, creative, bit imaginative. I'm fascinated to learn that they're already developing another Ant-Man movie. That's nuts. A fourth one.
The third one's not even in the theater yet as we're recording this.
Third one yet. Yeah.
I think it'll be out by the time this podcast comes out, like just barely out.
Oh, okay.
But still.
Okay. That's fascinating. Like, why is that the standard bearer now? Like, they're good movies. I find them entertaining. But I just find it fascinating that that's the one, because I kind of want them to be able to go off and do different things. Like, don't lock them all into Ant-Man contracts for the next 10 years.
Now, an interesting argument that I saw in some of these articles was, it's similar to George Lucas's argument about the Star Wars sequels, that the expectations are so high now that people get more disappointed than they did about the earlier movies. I'm not sure I buy that. That's true.
But I mean, you and I were both old enough to remember that the original Star Wars movies actually occasioned a lot of angry debate, but you didn't have the same platform to voice that criticism. Right?
Yeah, no internet.
You didn't have that centralization of anger. Which I think is what we've been touching on repeatedly. I mean, and we walked into this discussion with the framing of what are the disappointments in Phase 4. Well, as I keep, repetitively arguing, I think the disappointment is a money-making aspect of the culture in respect of Phase 4. Because if I look at Phase 1, Phase 2, Phase 3, there's all sorts of mediocre shit in there too.
yeah, for sure. I didn't like Iron Man 3 at all, but
oh well, there we differ. But but like there's no sort of standard that's suddenly fallen. They're all like hit and miss.
Yeah.
Throughout these phases, there's these movies. I mean, good. There's been movies that I'll never watch again. And I think I find it fascinating that we're sort of talking about the decline of Marvel. I was like, well, that's a good example of clickbait, my friend.
Yeah, this one article I found was particularly negative. Like, Phase 4 was terrible. All these movies are terrible, and it's just going to get worse after this. Yeah.
It's nonsense. Like it's just. I'm not saying we should be championing these movies. I'm not saying that either. I'm simply saying that negative emotions, anger, is a good way to get people to respond. And a lot of the reviews that I've seen are like middle-aged men with beards shouting at the camera, and
Yeah.
apparently it's too woke. Which, if we could just put that in a grave,
Yes.
and, a couple of layers of soil on top, that would be wonderful. Because all you're doing, YouTube is now. I watched a video in French, so YouTube is now recommending me a bunch of French videos, and the algorithm has to algorithm. So now I saw one that just popped up in my feed from Le Wokeism. And I go, oh, God damn it, France. God damn it. You've got your own problems. Stop borrowing racism for another country. Bloody French. You sort out your situation first. And then you can talk about wokeism. The wokeisme. Yeah, no, I think there are aspects of these movies and these television shows that I really, really enjoyed, and there's other ones that I was like, yeah, I'm not going to watch that again. I'm probably not going to watch Black Panther: Wakanda Forever again, right? I'm probably not going to watch it a second time. There are things in it I really liked, but there are things in it also that I thought were like missed the mark, and I thought it was overlong, and frankly, I found the ultimate conflict between Wakandans and the South American inflected the version of the Atlantean culture that we see here. They're not called Atlanteans. Distressing, because it was a depiction of two indigenous peoples beating the crap out of each other while the white characters sit off to the side going, what are they doing over there? Like that just really bothered me. Like it really, really bothered me. And I questioned, it's an aspect of the plot that the movie itself addresses, but it was just a story that I was like, why are we doing this? Like, what the hell? What's the intent here? And it's a shame, because I thought the Namor, or however you're pronouncing it.
I guess it was inconsistent even within the movie. I don't really remember now, but
there is a fantastic Spanish language origin story for Namor in this movie. I really liked the performer. I really liked what he did. I really liked this version of the character. And I just found it that the character's decisions were inconsistent because of the plot demands, which was just unfortunate, because I really liked what was up to that point. I was like, yeah, I'm all about this. This is fantastic. What a great take. And then it just went off in this other direction and just made me feel kind of dirty afterwards. Like, I just like... yeah.
Well, kind of generally. So, of course, in Phase 3, we said goodbye to Iron Man and Captain America, and my understanding has been that they don't want to recast these major roles because they don't want people to compare the actors, like, oh, the old actor was better. What do you think about that? I guess I can kind of see it, but I don't know. At the same time, I think pretty soon they're going to run out of top-line characters. Because, if Cap and Iron Man are gone, Thor might be gone pretty soon. I don't know if Hulk is apparently still kind of in the mix, and we got Fantastic Four coming and presumably X-Men down the line. But beyond that, I don't know. It seems like Spider-Man, of course, but then we've got kind of second-tier characters after that.
Yeah, they seem to be franchising a lot of the concepts. So Iron Man to Ironheart, but also Iron Man to Doctor Strange to some degree, because in this version of the character, he's basically Tony Stark but magic. Captain America, well, the whole plot of the Falcon and the Winter Soldier was who gets to be the new Captain America.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Which, got caught up in all sorts of COVID nonsense, but also a scene where Sam scolds the leader of the free world to stop being mean to people who want their civil rights, which I thought was ridiculous. The Hawkeye, the torch has clearly been passed from Jeremy Renner to Haley Steinfeld.
I guess what they're doing is not just recasting the same role, but sort of recasting it in universe by a different character being that hero.
That which could work. And that's what a lot of the comics have tried to do over the years, but ultimately they always circle back to the original characters. Like, the fact that Barry Allen is the Flash again is incredible to me. Like, how the hell did they let that happen? But the problem with that is, and I think I like that idea. I like the idea of these characters growing older, and then we see what happens next. The problem with Marvel is they've introduced the multiverse.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm worried that they're just going to segue into a new universe, and they're just going to have all new actors playing these characters, and we'll just tell all new stories with them.
Mm-hmm.
That'll we'll have Thanos again. We'll have Captain America again. We'll have Iron Man again. Obviously, we'll do stories with characters that got killed off, and the fans are upset because they killed off that character. Oh, bring them back, but it's somebody else now. Michael B. Jordan will be Black Panther. I don't know. I don't know where it's going, but like that's my worry that they just knock everything over and start again with a multiverse. Because I like the idea of a girl growing up inspired by Tony Stark and becoming Ironheart. Like, I like that idea, and then she grows up and she becomes a character, and then somebody else is inspired by her. Like, keep that ball rolling, but I don't see it happening in a movie universe. I just don't see it.
Well, I don't know. I think the whole thing might run out of steam before they have a chance to do a new universe Captain America and Iron Man, but
perhaps like Disney could just put it all in mothballs for a bit. Like, again, you and I are both of a certain vintage. There was a period of time when Disney would release a movie, and then that was it. You didn't see that movie again for like maybe a decade, maybe 2 decades, maybe longer. The famous archive, the Disney archive. You'd occasionally get a video release.
Well, even before that, I remember when like the old movies from the like 40s and 50s or 60s would come around in the theaters again in the 70s. I saw a lot of those Disney movies in the theater in a decade or 2 or 3 after they originally came out.
Maybe they mothball Marvel. Maybe they just like wrap it all up, and what the impact that would have on the comics would be devastating, because pretty much that's what the comics now are. They are advertising for the movies. That's what you've done with the comic books. So yeah, I think it'll be a huge shame, because assuming there's a built-in sell-by date to this movie universe, I can see them just putting it all to rest.
I don't know. In terms of creativity of the comics, I think it might be nice to not have the movies anymore, because the movies then make too much impact on what happens in the comics, and they have to say, oh, now there's a different Nick Fury, and this is why he's black, and it's like
sure, but they're dependent on. The reason they exist is because the movies are bringing in the money for the publisher.
Sure. I mean, obviously, the movies are making tons more money than the comics are.
And without the movies, the comics really don't have a reason to exist anymore, and they're no longer independent of that studio, of Disney. They simply don't have a reason to exist outside of let's be creative and use these characters. That's my worry, that their justification is that for them currently is as a IP farm. You take away that, what's the point? So that's my
Disney
fear.
Disney suits might decide, let's just not have comics anymore.
Yeah, why not?
Case.
Just I saw somebody saying, when is Marvel going to release the cross-gen books? Remember cross-gen? Because they own cross-gen. And the reply came back, well, why would they? Like, yeah, they own it,
But they didn't do all that well the first time around. So
yeah, or Malibu Comics. They own Malibu Comics. We're not going to get Malibu Comics. We're not going to get Best of. We're not going to get Ultraverse or whatever it was called.
Theoretically, they might turn one of those things into a movie if they
potentially. Yeah, it's IP. They're sitting on it. It's just there in a folder somewhere.
Yeah.
But that's my point. you just sit on these things until potentially the profit potential of the product suddenly goes up. Otherwise, they just sit somewhere. You don't need to do anything with them, but you own them. You have control over them. What a bleak vision. So, can I just say, of all the movies we've talked about, we did not mention Shang-Chi. And I thought, of all the movies that came out in the cinema, Shang-Chi was the one that was actually fun.
Okay.
I thought that was the one that I actually had a good time with.
It was fun. The only thing that bothered me about it was that I was correctly anticipating story beats. Like I'm wise to them now. It's like there's a picture of a dragon. That means we're getting a dragon later in the movie.
I thought it made my heart grow one size larger to see all these young people online going, "Oh my God, Tony Leung, he's so sexy." Children, welcome. And like Sir, what's his name? Sir Ben Kingsley. Once again getting to play that character who I really enjoy. Despite your admitted dislike of Iron Man 3, I love.
Yeah, well, when he first showed up, I was like, "Who's this guy? Like, was in another movie? What?" And eventually, I think I had to look it up after the movie. Like, oh, okay. Maybe I figured it out during the film. I'd completely forgotten that terrorist was from Seven Rings terrorist group.
9 Rings. Yeah.
So, yeah, my memory failed me there.
10 Rings. Sorry.
One other concern that I've got in general is that, people complain that Marvel Comics are too complicated for new readers to get into. I think the films are going the same direction.
Yeah. Like, again, I wonder if that's part of the approach now, is just we've successfully connected all these characters in the same universe. We've established this as a shared world. Let's just tell these stories in these different patches and just have fun with them. I think Moon Knight was a very interesting example of that, because very little mention of any Marvel properties in that. Right. And, these Egyptian gods froze time.
I remember watching that and wondering what impact that was having on all the other characters who were like in this phase. But yeah, it never came up.
Yeah, and I wonder, which is an aspect that's very common to comic books, where Magneto will take over New York, and the readers write into the letters page and go, "What the hell was the Fantastic Four doing about that?" So yeah, yes, you're right. The same problems of comic books are impacting the movies and television shows.
Yeah, it's like I think if I had not seen any of them, well, of course you can always go back and watch them all online or whatever. But and I'm the one who watched them all within the first 3 phases within like a year or so, as Mulele and I were discussing them all for the Patreon podcast. So it's doable, I guess, but especially if you're a podcaster. But you have to do a lot of work to get caught up.
Yeah. Or you could just do what Sam Raimi did with Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness and just not bother. And just do your own thing. And then, all right, guys, good night. I'm off.
Yeah, kind of toss out some of WandaVision, and
I don't think he watched it. I think he's actually said he didn't watch it. He didn't watch WandaVision.
Well, that doesn't surprise me, considering the result.
Yeah, and on its face, I think the Multiverse of Madness, would have been fine, because the Sam Raimi bits, like the clear Sam Raimi bits, where you have like characters like suddenly twerking and twitching and like crawling out of mirrors and getting like impaled on fences, and the zombie cloak. Oh my God, the zombie cloak! Like, those are things that I remember my Video Nasty era days really enjoying. That's similar sort of iconography that Sam Raimi likes to employ. But then the rest of the stuff was just kind of dull. And I suspect that the rest of the stuff was the stuff that he was being told to do. And he's like, okay. And he had no context for it, and he had no affection for it, and he didn't really care one way or the other, and which is odd because I think he's a nerd, and I think I'm sure there's this sort of accreted, almost like the the walls of an artery, accreted with stuff that the Marvel Studio is now obsessed with this detail, and a filmmaker who maybe has read the comic books is coming into that space and going, "Oh, guys, I don't know what you're talking about. And I know Doctor Strange, but like, what are you talking about?" It felt it was a movie that was divorced from itself. It was a very strange movie.
Well, yeah, I mean, reading some of these articles put me in touch with some of the things that I found disappointing about it. Like, going into the multiverse, we didn't really see all that much interesting in the multiverse. They could have done so much more with that, with a bit more CG. And America Chavez didn't really get to do anything. Just stand around looking cute, which she does well. But, she has some powers, and I guess at the very end she got to do something. But could have been more of her, and also, I don't know. Maybe it's kind of the same thing as with Spider-Man. I was disappointed that they introduced all those alternate universe superheroes and then killed them all. Like, what?
Yeah. Although seeing Jim from The Office being turned into a bowl of spaghetti was just so much fun for me. So much fun. Bit like that bit in Meet Joe Black when Brad Pitt gets run over repeatedly by traffic. Eminently enjoyable. Just like, just watch that again. Let's rewind and watch that again. Yeah, that was fun. But it was, again, that was your IP farm right there. It's like, look at this character, look at this character, look at this character. We're going to have movies about all of these characters.
Professor X and
Black Bolt. Hey, did you recognize the theme music from the Professor X? Hey, we got the actor from that terrible Inhumans show that played Black Bolt again. I really feel for that guy. He apparently did a lot of prep to play Black Bolt. He invented his own language and everything.
Oh wow!
It just was wasted. So, what a ridiculous scene. Like, what a stupid scene. Got to see them all die horribly.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know that I have any particular expectations of Phase 5 either. I think Ant-Man, it sounds good. I guess Kang is going to show up in it. I mean, I'm not somebody who watches trailers and reads all the rumors. I know that it's coming out, and it's called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. That's about all I know. And I don't know. Looking at I guess we've seen some of the build-up to Thunderbolts that's coming out next year. That's what the whole Julia Louis-Dreyfus thing is supposed to be, I guess.
Yeah.
The rest of it, I'm not sure what the connections are going to be to the multiverse. Guardians of the Galaxy, I guess that could have something to do with it. The Marvels, no idea. Captain America New World Order sounds a little more street level. And then Blade, if it happens at all. I don't know. I don't really care about vampires anyway. I wouldn't mind if they just didn't make that movie, but...
For the listener, I'm holding up for Tim a birthday present I was just given, which is... Vampire Cinema, the first 100 years by Christopher Frayling.
Okay.
Literally sitting beside me I care a lot about vampires.
Okay.
Yeah, Blade is the movie which kicked off this whole thing. Blade is the movie which really established that superhero films could work, but it's the movie that doesn't get the credit for doing so. As X-Men and Spider-Man get the credit, but Blade was the one with that amazing scene of the blood disco with the New Order track. Oh my god, what a fantastic movie! Blade 2 is my favorite. But this new Blade, it almost felt like the contractually obligated. Let's do Blade, because Blade is the film that actually kicked off this whole process. So Kevin Feige brought Mahershala on stage, introduced, we got Blade, and I just remember feeling no disrespect to the actor, because I think he'll do a fantastic job, but just remember thinking to myself, oh no, what are we doing? Like, are we just going to do Blade by the numbers, or are we going to do something interesting? And the fact that this production has already been stalled specifically because of the script as well. Like, there was issues with the script. I'm really, really worried about it. I want it to be good because I think Blade's a fascinating concept, and Marvel owes this black character so much. Blade saved Marvel's bacon, basically. It doesn't get the credit. So I really want to see where they go with it. I hope it's good, but I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. Thunderbolts I couldn't give a toss about.
Well, I hope it's good. I mean, I don't think it's going to be very much like the comic. I mean, I really enjoyed the original Thunderbolt series back in the late 90s, early 2000s. But
Kurt Busiek stuff.
Right. But who knows how close this is going to be to that. It sounds like it might be more like some of the later iterations of Thunderbolts that were okay, but like the Jeff Parker version, it was okay, but it wasn't what I liked about the original. Where they're like bad guys who somebody is forcing to be superheroes, but they're not really into turning good. Where the original, most of the characters, not Moonstone, were kind of into being good, and that it was more interesting for that, I think. But
yeah, it's they seem to be going with the Warren Ellis idea of these characters will all be taking the names of existing superheroes that the public knows, but they'll be sort of more morally flexible actors. And that could be good, but that could also, I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. That's a good note to end on. We'll see. If you've enjoyed this discussion or other Deconstructing Comics episodes, tell your friends. Share your favorite episodes on your social media. You can follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or YouTube by clicking our new social media buttons at deconstructingcomics.com. Our theme is by J.B. Anderton. If you're looking for some constructive feedback on your comic, send it to us and we'll critique it on our spin-off podcast, Critiquing Comics. Send it to mail@deconstructingcomics.com. We'll read it and record our critique. Next week, we look into the intersection of comics and graffiti with two interesting guests. On a recent Critiquing Comics, Jason and I looked at the silent comic Christiania, written by 13-year-old Abby Behe and featuring numerous instances of graffiti. The book is part of a series by Abby's father, Thomas John Behe, who recently recruited several graffiti artists in different parts of the world to do a version of his comic Bad Benny that was continued from a wall in one city to a wall in another, with photos of the entire sequence available on Facebook. I'll talk with Tom about that project and the overall Contraband series. I'll also talk with Argentine graffiti artist Koff, spelled C-O-F. He makes his living in animation, including for Disney and Cartoon Network, but his passion is graffiti art in a country where it's not illegal, and he works in a very cartoony style. Both were cool conversations, and you'll hear them both here next week. Till then, this is Tim, and thanks for listening to Deconstructing Comics.